Well, thanks for coming. I know not to walk too far into the shot this way because there's a big square on the camera over there. So I'll try and not move around too much and keep attention. There is a laser on here, so if I see anybody multitasking, I'll just point it right in your eyes, potentially blind you. So I'm Yves Boudreau. I'm running the ecosystem strategy group. What does that mean? You'll find out today, but the way I explain it in the most layman of terms is I'm trying to figure out what we're going to put on this edge network that we built. And I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, so thanks for coming. I've probably spoken to all of you, and what you're going to hear today is kind of an update on what myself and now a very small group of people in my team have been working on for the last 12 months. So I can assure you I had a fantastic time with my ride this morning, which was an autonomous vehicle, where I watched virtual reality the entire way here, and what I was watching was actually a remote surgery being done in eastern Mongolia over 5G. So all technologies that I'm sure will be vastly successful maybe in 10 years from now, but not something I'm planning on taking advantage of anytime soon. But what we're going to talk about today is a little bit more of the reality of kind of what we've learned over time as talking to quite a few companies out in the space. So I'll give you a brief update on UDN, tell you what it is in case you haven't heard of what it is. I'll give you a summary of the strategy work that we've been doing in the last 12 months. We'll talk about some of the companies and how we select partners to kind of engage with us on the UDN platform, what we've learned so far, and kind of get some feedback. Hopefully you guys will have some questions or some zingers for me that I can that'll help me think as well and challenge me a little bit in terms of what we've done. So we were here in New York in May. We were asked to do the keynote for the CDN Summit this year. And we came and told everybody that CDN is dead, along with the edge, which was a fancy way of saying we have to do much, much more with these edge networks. CDN is a great application, but it's not the only thing. So the other thing that we've been talking about a lot is that as a fundamental belief in our organization, we see a big wave of internet traffic coming, connected devices. I'm going to say the word IoT hopefully only once in this entire chat, but ultimately more devices connecting, more control traffic, more actual traffic overall, creating this next wave. And we just don't fundamentally believe that that next wave of internet traffic is going to scale without active participation from service providers. Those service providers being essentially the guys who own the last mile networks, whether they be wireline, wireless, fiber, what have you, wherever you get your internet connection from. These guys have to be on board with helping this scale. It's just not going to work without them. And we've been out on the circuit, if you will, trying to get people to understand how to engage with the service provider community. So what is the UDN? This is the first time I've actually tried to write it down in hopefully terms that everybody can understand, but it's our live edge cloud platform. And we built it in partnership with service providers, and it's to really kind of get to that next level of web scale applications at the edge of the network. So far we've got about 80 or so service providers who've signed on. We're about half deployed at this stage. Some content on the network flowing through, some tests, some billable, really to kind of go prove out the network and make sure that everybody's comfortable with kind of how this thing is going to operate. And we've actually built our own stuff as well in 22 different core locations around the world. Those core locations are all major metros that you would expect them to be. And this is kind of our personal investment in trying to help the service providers understand that we're in this together with them, putting our own money, our own resources to collectively aggregate a large number of edges into this core network and then to start experimenting with some of the applications that you'll see here today. So what are we building? Well, we're trying to build essentially a new category of edge computing, or an edge cloud platform that has some shared value to it. And the way that we onboard existing partners is a little bit different. We don't necessarily ask for these big, huge checks up front to go build it. We've actually kind of invested ahead of the market, but we're trying to build this shared value ecosystem for everybody, specifically in partnership with the service provider community. We actually had an opportunity, since we're not 20 years in the CDN business, to actually go and select some of the more modern technologies to put into the cloud stack. So you'll notice a lot of open source, nothing that you guys probably haven't heard of before in terms of the underlying tech stack itself. And then the platform has really tried to find some of these real applications that are out there. So this is the cast of characters that you hear people throwing around in terms of where all of the edge traffic will come from and the applications themselves, but we'll drill down a little bit further into it. And of course, you can't forget 5G, which we also believe as a company is going to be a last mile wireless technology that will really be for the masses, giving you kind of gigabit and tens of gigabit speeds. So at a high level, what our guiding lights have really been is we're really trying to build this next wave of public edge or public cloud computing, I would say, at the edge in partnership with operators. We're focused on building the platform itself, not the applications necessarily. And we're going to use partnerships to create that differentiation and scale. We're not trying to replace public cloud. So if anybody was to come and say, hey, are you guys an Amazon for the edge? Sort of, but not really. We're not trying to replace public cloud. We think that they've done a fantastic job over the years at creating a net new category of business. We think that the next wave of that will actually be at the edge. So we're not actually trying to replace the public clouds. We're trying to work with them. So the first and simplest application was CDN. Service providers use them today. Most of you guys probably use them in some way, shape, or form. And there's probably been 20, 30, 40, 50 different companies in the space that have all done quite well. And it's a very mature business. So it was a really good first application, but it's not the only one. And so we've also, as part of the UDN network, offered something called shared CDN. Shared CDN is basically if you're an operator and you have your own OTT video service, you can actually use what you install for other people yourself. And instead of paying another CDN to deliver your traffic, you can actually just pay yourself to use the same network. So it's kind of got a dual purpose and allows you to share the infrastructure that we're actually installing. So how our approach is different. We don't think anybody has actually successfully gotten this many service providers to collaborate in one platform pretty much ever. And it's a huge, we think, feather in our cap, but we also think it's a huge risk. Ultimately, if the service providers don't play ball, we don't really have a business, and we can't actually disrupt the industry the way that we'd like to. But the actual edge cloud sites are actually inside the firewall, so they're actually inside the operator network, and we actually scale directly to those last mile eyeballs, essentially. As opposed to, I think the Vimeo guy said it this morning, to get into India with 10 terabits, he had to basically get all the surrounding countries to essentially flood all the networks simultaneously from outside of India. So we're trying to actually not do that because we don't believe that's the way the internet's going to scale. So installing inside the operator network and then doing a revenue share with them in terms of the actual traffic coming into the network, we believe is a more sustainable model. And now we're trying to incubate this next wave of applications outside of just CDN. So a couple of customers and partners who've taken advantage of the shared CDN business model. NTT Docomo launched with us last year. They've now started carrying their live events on their own network as well as carrying traditional traffic. And the first partner that we announced back in September of last year was a company called NetInsight. NetInsight has a specific need to launch what I would consider a proprietary CDN technology for low latency streaming video using UDP protocols, but ultimately needs to be installed in the operator network to actually make their stuff scale. Right? They can't actually deliver a terabit of data from public cloud. It just doesn't work that way. They've recently announced partnerships as well with Amazon for their smaller customers, but the idea is that as the application graduates into more bandwidth or more users on the network itself, they actually would move parts of their application further in the operator network and deliver from inside the firewall. So what we've been looking for, good candidates for the edge are people who actually are familiar with public cloud. So they're not tree hugging their data centers anymore. They're actually realizing that there's validity in bringing your applications out of your private data center, managed by your friendly IT people, and actually put it on the public internet. We're looking for companies who've actually built a little bit more modern of runtimes. So if you need bare metal and you want to control your own Linux distributions and your own patches and your job title basically says like IT administrator, probably not the candidate for the edge. But people over time, I guess, will learn those skill sets and create modern runtimes that can actually utilize a cloud stack. Of course, the low latency requirement is always a helpful one. If something is not performing in public cloud, it's pretty easy to convince somebody they should bring that workload to the edge of the network. And as I mentioned with the NetInsight example, companies that have specific scaling of bandwidth problems. If you don't think something can scale in public cloud, chances are it's a pretty good candidate for the edge. So when we're looking for partners, we're looking for companies that actually feel that working with Ericsson and their strong relationship with service providers is actually a fast track for them. Can they actually deploy their technology on the UDN network and actually be able to get their business ramped up much quicker than they could if they went out and spent 2 years like we did going out and building a network that could actually host these applications. So that's what we're looking for from a partnership standpoint. And really we're focused on real edge computing. Not autonomous cars, not virtual reality, and not remote surgeries in Eastern Canada. I can say Canada, right? We're a third world country sometimes. No? Maybe? Okay. So we've talked to a lot of companies. You may see your logo of your company up here. Probably means we talk to you or plan on talking to you in the very near future. We're trying not to do this alone. We're trying to make sure that we're taking a very pragmatic approach to this, but talking to small companies who are just getting started all the way to the larger companies who understand that they have to get out of their data centers. We've gotten a lot of interesting feedback from these companies, and we'll continue to do so. If you're ever interested in any of these conversations that we're having, as long as we're not violating an NDA, happy to put you in touch with them as well, and you guys can go have your own discussions to see kind of how they plan to make use of the edge network itself. So some learnings from some of our UDN partners, both on the service provider side and on the application side. Wireless networks, they're growing fast. Everybody has a mobile device. But the volume of traffic is still found in wireline. So one of our partners actually, when I asked the question, how much of the traffic on your wireless network versus your wired network, how would you split that out? And they said 7% was on the wireless side of the network. 93% of that traffic was actually on the wired side. So we take that into our discussions and take that, balance it a little bit to say, okay, are we looking for applications that are on the wired side, wireless, and trying to find when we have a service provider partner who only has a wireless network, we present the wireless cases. If we have one that has a lot of traffic on the wired network, we focus more on the wired cases themselves. Application providers, people who build the technology, right? Startups, any company that has a product essentially or a piece of software that wants to run, these are the application providers. They're not equipped to handle hundreds of relationships. Even if they wanted to go to 100 service providers and talk to all of them, they have like 10 people in the company. They can't do it. Nor do they want to do it. You know, dealing with a telco or a cable operator is not exactly the easiest thing. Kind of takes a little bit of experience, if you will, to get to that point. The application guys, especially the startups, they don't have that experience and they don't really want it. So having a vehicle to get to that point and using the UDN to get to those markets and to those people to actually run their software is actually a good thing. The other thing the application people told us, which I thought was a little bit of tough love, was we don't want to, even if we did have 100 people to go talk to these service providers, I don't want to have to re-platform my software 100 times because a particular telco or cable guy has an environment that he believes is the right stack. So the application folks don't actually want to go to 100 disparate environments to go roll out an application, right? As opposed to, you know, hey, we built this, you should use what we have. They basically made it very clear. The reason we go to public cloud is because we can actually write once and deploy to many instances. We just want more than US East and US West. We actually want to be able to deploy ubiquitously on hundreds or thousands of edges in these cases. Can you help us? And we think we can. Content delivery was a great application. So this is some tough love for us where we've had some service provider partners come back and say, we're not looking to join UDN, especially if it's only a CDN, we're not interested. You guys have to figure out something else. CDN is a great use case, but there has to be more than this. You guys have to figure out what you're going to do beyond CDN, and that's what we've been trying to sort out. So the first wave, these 4 companies, we're at different stages with them. Some are commercially available on the platform. Others we're trying to work through some technical stuff to make sure that they can actually scale. One of the things when we talked about a lot of the other companies that I didn't put in this slide deck was a big takeaway was that people really aren't ready to run their software on a cloud stack. Right? They're still very bare metal, virtual machine. Very few people are actually touching Kubernetes, even though if you read the news, everybody's on it today. You know, I'm surprised lunch is not being served on Kubernetes today. That's how popular it is. But people are still trying to figure out microservices, cloud native, insert buzzword of the day here. But the software is not as modern as we think it is. So we've actually had to be a little more flexible in our thinking. Originally, we thought everybody was going to use containers and that everybody was going to run on Kubernetes clusters. Turns out that's not what they want right now. So we've actually taken a step back and exposed more bare metal installation and more virtual machine installations as they try and modernize their own technology stack. And you'll hear a few of these partners of ours speak today. Mode and Haste are actually here. But these are the front runners that we've seen that kind of meet that criteria that we discussed a little bit earlier. So what we tell people publicly today is that we're a live network, right? 22 of our own core locations where we start onboarding the actual applications, and then we graduate them to the edge. CDN really is just the first application for us, but we're incubating this next wave of applications as well. If you have any good suggestions, please do let us know, and we'll help you understand if UDN is right for you. But today we actually continue to roll out our shared CDN model as a means to continue to build out the network itself, test its performance, but also continue to look for those next wave of applications that we think will be utilized on the network. But the big thing at the end that I want to emphasize here is that together we're really creating a brand new market vertical. This doesn't exist today. You saw in Dan's presentation this morning, which maybe was a little bit more direct than some people wanted. This market doesn't really exist today. We're trying to create it, and it's going to take a village of people to actually go discuss things transparently, right? No secrets with me. I'll tell you what I know, as long as I'm not violating an NDA, to help people understand what the real applications are going to be on the network, where the challenges are going to be, and what we need to do as an industry in order to create this market vertical. And I think that's it. Oh, the State of the Edge report. So Please do join our panel today. We collaborated with some companies that are here as well. Published a very lengthy report, so if you have a long flight, I would say it's a good read from that standpoint. But it's meant to take people through kind of how we got here today and actually bring some common language, common expressions to have people understand kind of what the edge actually is. This particular report makes a clear differentiation between infrastructure edge, which is what the UDN is actually preparing with its edge cloud platform, and the device edge, right? So have a read of the report if you haven't. You can download it for free. We're going to produce another one of these probably near the end of the year, maybe early next. We're actually going to go out to the market and we're going to survey developers to see how they actually plan on using, where the high-running applications are, the languages that need to be there, the databases, operating systems. We don't think we're going to build a full-blown public cloud implementation. Amazon wasn't built in a day. They're 12 years into this thing, and they started off with a few slivers in markets where they thought they could actually be successful and where there was a need from the community. We're going to do the same thing. So if you're coming to us and saying, you know, can you please give me your entire platform services deck, and we'll go and select which ones we want, that's not what we're doing right now. We're actually trying to sort out what the high-running edge applications are going to be, the platform services required by our partners, and then go focus on those and build from the ground up. So we don't think it's going to be a full-blown implementation of cloud at the edge of the network. So we need your help. That's it. Yes? Okay. Yes? The who, sorry? Halt and Catch Fire. I am not. I watch hockey. That's all I watch. Well, that's a great question. We've actually gotten that question a few times, so this answer might be a little bit rehearsed for you. But, and I'm not a huge fan of... Oh, repeat the question. So if I was to give advice to somebody building a virtual reality game, knowing what we know today about the networks that it might be delivered on, what would I tell those people? Is that fair? Yeah? What would I make sure they knew? If I was telling them today what they should be doing, it's stay away from the network altogether and put everything into the console. The reactiveness and the fields of view required for getting people to not be sick all over themselves is actually still very sensitive. People are still learning how to produce not only games but television shows to actually make use of the technology that's available. And so far, running it in the network has not really been as reliable as they need it to be. If they really want to build the user experience, focus on the production value of the game. Focus less on running it somewhere outside of the actual console or the headset itself is what I would tell them. If they can get the production value right, we won't have another 3D where it's going to be the biggest thing since sliced bread and nobody knows how to produce a television show or a game that actually people will consume. So I would say focus on the experience of the game first, locally, and then figure out a way to actually distribute some of the actual computing power required to actually render it. I would say put as much into the console and the headset as humanly possible, which may or may not be good advice. But I'm pretty sure it's good advice. Yes. Yeah, no, definitely the guys who built the cloud so far are the ones that are in the best position to go do that. Ironically, those guys built it for their own purposes to start. And if you look at the flexibility of the actual environments themselves, they've gotten a lot better over the years. But yes, the actual DNA is there. Our group actually operates separately from our networking division, if you want to call it that. So the core business, we actually separate and we actually are an independent unit within the organization, and we've actually acquired a company, and we've also continued to hire people from these actual cloud providers to bring in that expertise. The question was, you know, as a network provider, are you really the best equipped to build this edge compute platform? Ironically enough, one of the biggest problems. Yep. Well, that's the thing. We're not building the application logic. We're letting the people bring their own application logic to it. Yeah, and we're not providing the development environment per se. What we're basically trying to build is the best actual platform and connectivity to the platform. And one of the biggest problems that we have in public cloud today is just egress. It's an egress problem. Connectivity to the networks themselves is what makes these applications sink or swim. And so we do know how to build those networks from a networking standpoint. We're not trying to build the application logic in. In fact, what you'll hear from the Haste guys today is they actually bring their entire application, all the logic, all the management to the table themselves. So you're right, we're not the ones. That's why that second bullet in that high-level vision slide says we're not focusing on the applications. Maybe I should put the logic in there as well. But today the platform runs, for example, on OpenStack and Kubernetes, and that's the actual type of talent that we're actually hiring now, and we've hired in the past to actually go build the best environment, the best technology stack itself on the platform side to let people bring their applications, that logic, their management, their deployment tools at this point in the game. Yep. It's a big catalog. I don't think we've found any real low-hanging fruit from that standpoint. And we've said, by the way, we've said no to a lot of companies who've asked us to come in and, let's say, bring their applications. We just tell them, we don't think you need the edge. You guys should really just go run in public cloud. Your applications are good. Now, one thing that I do think that has shown a lot of promise is there's a lot of companies that feel that because of the low latency nature of the edge and these applications that we're still looking for, frankly, that need that low latency, hardware itself is actually something that's come out. A lot of hardware companies that really feel that there's a position for them at the edge in their technology. You know, ARM was up there. Intel, of course, thinks there's room for them there. Xilinx did a bunch of announcements this week. NVIDIA. So another company out of Atlanta called Hellastorm, which is building a packet acceleration type of an FPGA. So the hardware piece of it actually is quite interesting. We have seen a lot of companies that want to do data processing and storage locally somewhere else, where they have regulatory type of considerations that they need. They need to know that your data is being processed, stored, or both in a particular zip code or particular city. And as you know, public cloud is not everywhere. That's the economics of public cloud is that they're not everywhere. But I think the machine learning AI stuff that is either real time or has regulatory kind of considerations seems to be a high runner. We haven't focused a ton on it so far. But there are a few companies that are focused on that. A really good one that we've spoken to as well is Macrometa. They're big in edge as well, but they're building processing pipelines for people who actually want to take that data and run it somewhere else in the network where there is no public cloud infrastructure. Mm-hmm. It's one whiskey for every question. I forgot to mention that. So. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think there's two questions in there, right? I'll say the first one is in terms of mature technologies that most CDNs have deployed, right? Are we agnostic, let's say, to those feature sets, and how do we play, I guess, would you say, with maybe CDN technology companies? And then the second one is, do I think that the edge, what is the cost model, or what do I think the pricing looks like? So I'll answer the last one first. I don't think anybody's going to be able to charge more for the edge. That's my personal belief. Of course, people will try, and it depends how you can show that value to those end users. I think it's quite possible that you could charge more, but at a baseline, people know how CDN is bought and sold, but they also know how public cloud is bought and sold. So we're not going to go change those economics in any appreciable way unless you find an industry vertical that really has a desperate need without any alternatives, in which case just laws of economics will help you get to higher prices. But I think you'll be able to charge at least as much as it is today. And I'll tell you, people think public cloud is cheap. Talk to anybody who's running their business in public cloud. Go talk to Spotify, right, about this $450 million deal they just struck with Google. That's a lot of money. Now, as long as it's less than running your own IT, and you don't have to deal with your friendly neighborhood IT guy, then I think you'll be okay. But I don't think we're going to charge more unless it's a specialty application. And in terms of CDNs running, I mean, if you look at PacketZoom and NetInsight, they are CDN technologies. That's what they are. They just don't happen to use traditional protocols that don't run well over the public internet. Ultimately, I think a lot of these protocols end up being kind of benefits to us. So if you have these crazy protocols and they're running in containers or running in virtual machines, we don't care. They're going to traverse the network no matter what. And they'll scale a lot better, we think. So, the long-term vision and strategy of UDN is not to be a CDN long-term. We'll continue to build the technology as long as it's useful for people, and if they don't, then ultimately the platform itself becomes the focus. So all the hiring, if you look at inside the organization, all the hiring, all the focus of the engineers now is to figure out how to actually roll off the application work and to go focus more on the platform piece of it. Any other questions? You can't ask a question. You work here. Yeah, so for the people joining us on the video, we have an event every year at Mobile World Congress. We'll be bringing together a lot of folks, not only on the traditional CDN side of the business, but more so on the edge cloud side of the business as well. So if you guys want to attend, by all means speak to myself or Matthew, and we'll be happy to get you guys an invitation. That'll be at the end of February in Barcelona. The next couple of events that we'll be at are SCTE, NextTV. I mean, you can always get more information at the website as well, ericssonudn.com. So thanks for coming out. We appreciate it.